Hello everyone, I welcome you all in the seventh part of 1000 most expected question series for CUET-PG English Literature exam. So those of you are preparing for CUET-PG 2026 English Literature exam, do like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel to get to know all the important questions that have been already asked in different exams like CUET-PG and UGC NET JRF. As you all know, we have already discussed about the Old English period, Middle English period and the Renaissance period, and who are the important authors of Restoration period and the early 17th century prose and novelist of the 18th centuries. We have already discussed all of them, and in this session we will discuss some of the important transitional writers of 18th century and who are the important Gothic novelists of 18th century and the early 19th century. All of them we will discuss in our today's session. So watch this video till the end to get to know all the important questions from 18th century. So without further delay, let's begin the session. The first question of today's session is, what is the subtitle of the work She Stoops to Conquer? We all know She Stoops to Conquer is a poem by Oliver Goldsmith, and the poem and the subtitle of this work is The Mistake of a Night. The Mistake of a Night is a subtitle of Oliver Goldsmith's poem She Stoops to Conquer, and this poem was published in the year 1733. The second question is, who wrote the work The Rivals? The work Rivals was written by one of the most important author of 18th century, and in this work there was a character which is named as Malaprop, and from this character the author invented a new term, that is malapropism. And the work The Rivals was written by Richard Brinsley Sheridan. Richard Brinsley Sheridan wrote this work The Rivals, and this work is published in the year 1775. And from this work he introduced a new term, that is malapropism. The third question is, what is the subtitle of the work Evelina? The work Evelina, which is written by Frances Burney, one of the early female writer of 18th century, and he has also written some of the other important works like Cecilia, Camellia, and it was Jane Austen who took the inspiration for her work Pride and Prejudice from Frances Burney's work Cecilia. The title of the work Evelina is The History of a Young Lady's Entry into the World. The History of a Young Lady's Entry into the World is the subtitle of Frances Burney's novel Evelina, and the work is published in the year 1778. The fourth question is, who wrote the work Principles of Geology? Principle of Geology is written by one of the 18th century author, and he was the friend of the, the 19th century scientist Charles Darwin. And the work Principles of Geology is written by Sir Charles Lyell. Sir Charles has written the work Principles of Geology. The fifth question is, who introduced the term picturesque? The term picturesque was introduced in the late 18th century, and this term is introduced by William Gilpin. William Gilpin introduced the term in the year 1782. This question is, who introduced the phrase noble savage? We all know noble savage is a phrase which is introduced by John Dryden in his work Conquest of Granada, and this phrase was later used by John Jacques Rousseau. The phrase noble savage was introduced by John Dryden. The seventh question is, who wrote the poem Grongar Hill? The poem Grongar Hill is one of the most important poems of 18th century, and the poem Grongar Hill is written by John Dyer. The eighth question is, the elegy In Yonder Grave a Druid Lies is dedicated to the elegy In Yonder Grave a Druid Lies, and this elegy is dedicated to his beloved friend James Thomson. The ninth question is, who wrote the graveyard poem The Complaint? In the late 18th century, there were many poets who wrote poems on graveyard like Thomas Parner, Edward Young, Robert Blair, and the poem The Complaint was written by Edward Young. Edward Young wrote this poem, The Complaint, and in his poem he deals with the theme of grave. The 10th question is no more higher ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. No more higher ignorance is bliss, it is to be folly to be wise is a line from which poem of the late 18th century. The line is taken from the poem Ode on a Distant Prospect of Eton College. Ode on a Distant Prospect of Eton College is a poem by Thomas Gray, and from this poem the famous line no more higher ignorance is bliss, is 'tis folly to be wise is taken from. 11th question is what are the names of Horace Walpole's two cats? We all know in literature there are many works in which the animals plays a very significant role like Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. Horace Walpole has animals and his animals are two cats and these cats are Selima and Zara. Selima and Zara are the name of the two cats. The 12th question is what does the word memento mori means? The phrase memento mori is introduced in the late 18th century and the phrase depicted or the phrase means remember you must die. Remember is you must die is the meaning of the phrase memento mori. The 13th question is in which year did Thomas Gray's Elegy written in a country churchyard publish? Thomas Gray's Elegy written is a country churchyard is a poem or Thomas Gray was the one of the most important transitional poets of 18th century and his poem Elegy written in country churchyard which deals with the theme of graveyard and this poem is published in the year 1751. In the year 1751, Thomas Gray published his Elegy written in a country churchyard. The 14th question is what are the two Pindaric odes by Thomas Gray? Like transitional poems, Thomas Gray also wrote some of the important Pindaric odes, and these Pindaric odes are The Progress of Poesy and the Bard. The Progress of Poesy and the Bard are the two important Pindaric poems or Pindaric odes which is written by Thomas Gray. The 15th question is God made the country and man made the town. God made the country and man made the town is a line from the work The Task. God made the country and man made the town is a famous line which is taken from William Cowper poem The Task. Who wrote oceanic poems? Who wrote the oceanic poems? The oceanic poems are written by James Maxperson. James Maxperson introduced the phrase oceanic poems and in these poems he deals with a Greek bard which named as Ocean and these are the oceanic poems by James Macpherson. The 17th question is William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience published in we all know William Blake wrote many poems like The Tiger, The Lamb and these poems are included in his poetry collection Song of Innocence and Experience and the Songs of Innocence and Experience was published in the year 1794. The 18th question is who states that Milton is the devil's party without knowing it? Milton is the devil party is one of the most important phrases of 18th century and this phrase was introduced by William Blake. William Blake introduced the phrase that Milton is the devil's party without knowing it and this phrase was introduced in his work The Marriage of Heaven and Hell which is published in the year 1790. The 19th question is what was the first Gothic novel? In the late 18th century there were introduction of Gothic novels and there are many writers who deals with Gothic themes like Horace Walpole, Clara Reeve, William Beckford and Radcliffe and the first Gothic novel in English literature is The Castle of Otranto. The Castle of Otranto is the first Gothic novel in English literature which is written by Horace Walpole and this work is published in the year 1764. The 20th question is who wrote the novel Old English Baron? Like The Castle of Otranto also deals with Gothic themes, and this novel, The Old English Baron, as written by Clara Reeve. Clara Reeve wrote this work in the year 1778. The 21st question is, what is the subtitle of Caleb William? Caleb William is one of the most important work by William Godwin, and in this work he deals with various Gothic themes, and the subtitle of the work, the Caleb William, is Things as They Are, or The Adventure of Caleb William. Things as They Are, or The Adventure of Caleb William is the subtitle of William Godwin Gothic work Caleb William, and this work is published in the year 1794. The 22nd question is, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was written or published in year. Mary Shelley, who wrote her first Gothic novel Frankenstein, and in this work he deals with the creation of the monster Frankenstein, and this work is written in the year 1818. In the year 1818, Mary Shelley wrote the work Frankenstein, and the subtitle of this work is The Modern Prometheus. The 23rd question is, who wrote the work The Necessity of Atheism? For the work The Necessity of Atheism, the author was banished from the Oxford University without giving degree, and this work is written by the famous author of early 19th century P.B. Shelley. In the year 1811, P.B. Shelley wrote The Necessity of Atheism, and because of this work he was expelled from Oxford. The 24th question is, who introduced the concept of sublimity of terror? We all know the concept of sublime was introduced by Longinus, and he deals with the 5 sources of sublimity, but in the 17th century one author introduced the phrase the sublimity of terror, and this phrase was introduced by Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke introduced the phrase or the concept the sublimity of terror. The 25th or the last question is, Walter Scott's Waverley is deals with which war? We all know Walter Scott was the most important authors of early 19th century, and his work The Waverley, which deals with one of the most important war of early 18th century and Jacobite rebellion of 1745. Walter Scott novel Waverley deals with the Jacobite rebellion of 1745. And this was the last questions. These are the some of the important questions that have been already asked in different exams. So those of you are preparing for CUET-PG 2026 English Literature exam, do like, share and subscribe our YouTube channel, study materials and YouTube videos. Thank you everyone for watching this video.